Did you ever know Jen Griffin at Fox, the Pentagon reporter?
I think I may have met her, but no.
I don't want to single her out. She's perfectly nice. That's not true, actually.
Pentagon reporters are usually salutists.
Whoa. And what's interesting is she just carries she lies, and she carries the Pentagon line, not the kind of top, not the defense secretary line. He's a political appointee, but the permanent Pentagon, the interests of this agency, the largest government agency. And she just carries her line no matter what. No matter what. It doesn't matter how implausible it is. It's a neocon line. It's a very strict
And when you
neocon
challenge her, when she's on your show, which I'm sure you had this happen, because I had this happen at CNN, I'd have the Pentagon reporter on, and I'd challenge her on a question. She would complain to management, and then management would call me in and say, hey, take it easy with your questioning and what you were doing.
Are you serious?
Oh, I remember John Klein calling me the president of CNN. You remember John?
Do I remember John?
Yeah. We want to go in a rabbit hole here?
No, I'm not going to.
But John would call me and say, Rick, such and such says you got to really back off on this stuff. It's like, why? It's a perfectly legitimate question.
John
well,
Klein
she's upset.
Was a test of my personal decency and religious principles, because I was so mistreated by John Klein in the most dishonest way. No one's ever been that dishonest with me, ever in my life, that when John Klein got fired, which was, of course, inevitable from CNN, I called him to say, I heard you get fired, and I'm just so grateful that you did get fired because you deserve it.
Did you say that?
I didn't. Oh. So I called him on a cell. This was years later. He picks up, and then I was like, don't do that to somebody. Like, I'm a Christian. Don't act like that to somebody. Kick him when he's down. Don't do that. So I just hung up. He's like, hello, Tucker, hello. And I hung up. And that was the best I could do.
Yeah.
What I should have done as a Christian is called him and say, John, we had the problems between us, but I know what it feels like to be fired. I'm really sorry. I wasn't man enough to do that, but I did pull back.
What a moment.
Well, that
little moment, that half a second on the phone of silence. I don't want to be that
person. I don't want to kick the suffering man. I'm glad about your cancer diagnosis.
Damn.
I don't want to be that person. But boy, I was tempted because John Klein I've never dealt with anybody that dishonest. Like, literally, I resigned my job at CNN. I went to lunch with my brother at the Palm on 19th Street. I'll never forget. This was like back when you didn't check your cell phone all the time.
Yeah.
I get back to my office, and I have a call from Dave Bowder at the AP, who's the AP writer, and he's like, call me back right away. He's like, I'm sorry you just got fired from CNN. We have the statement from John Klein. I was like, what do you mean fired? I resigned this morning. I didn't get fired. What are you talking about? He's like, no, John Klein called me. Well, I was at lunch.
Oh, my God.
I was like, are you kidding? So I called John Klein. I was like, is this real? And he said, and I'm quoting, as God watches, he goes, it's just business.
It's just business.
I don't know why I'm telling this story. I've never told that story to anybody, but that was, yeah.
That's a great story.
So John, no, but that's how the business runs.
Sounds a little like the mafia, though.
Yeah, well, it totally is. And I'm sorry that
It's just business.
Now.
No, you and I have had interesting careers.
25 years later, it's like, of course that's what happened. It doesn't bother me at all.
And we're both better for it.
Oh, I completely agree. And anyone who's shocked by that kind of stuff is a naive, and I don't want to be naive. So I'm totally stepped all over your story because you triggered me with John Klein.
Well, here, let me help you. So after the Biden administration decides that they think this entity, which they really don't even understand, but apparently they thought my show was too popular and they didn't want me to be popular on a network other than the BBC or CNN. And so they essentially shut it down, thereby shutting me down by penalty of imprisonment. And I was a little angry about it, so I went around and I started telling people about it. Anybody who would listen, I would say, look, this is the situation I'm in, and it's very bothersome. And I got a lot of people, including the Society of Professional Journalists, who said, look, in a country like ours, the government doesn't get a chance to decide who are the winners and losers, who can report and who can do anything else. So they've invited me to actually speak at one of their forums, which I thought was cool. And then a very large newspaper here in the United States, in Washington no less, decided they were going to run a story on this. And essentially they wrote a story that essentially says the headline of, Rick Sanchez, former CNN reporter, challenging the Biden administration, hoping that the new Trump administration will change this law. And it was a legitimate story, telling the story that I've been telling you, that one day I was working and suddenly this was taken away from me and it was unfair. Perfectly legitimate story. And it was about to air, or be published the very next day, and I get a phone call Remember we talked earlier about a mysterious phone call?
Yeah.
Now there's this young journalist, nice young man, worked hard on this story, smart kid. And he says, Mr. Sanchez, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but the story that was going to come out tomorrow that you and I were both excited about it's been killed. They're not going to run the story. I said, why wouldn't they run the story? They said, well, because our managing editor, not my boss, his boss, apparently got a call last night from somebody, and they convinced him in that phone call that we should kill this story. And I said, can you give me more details? Do you know why? He goes, no, I don't even know who the person was who called him. And I don't usually work with my with the guy at the top. I usually work with my regular editor. I'm just a reporter, but I've never even heard of a phone call coming from the very top like that and canceling the story. So now, not only did I get a mysterious call that led to me losing my job at RT, now my just trying to share my story with people was being killed by another mysterious phone call.
Well, it was a neocon publication. So I'm from DC, you're not. So I happen to know the publication very well. And it's a neocon publication.
And we don't want to say it because we're a young man. I don't want to fire.
It's not it didn't happen to me, so I don't have the right to divulge it. But it's a publication in Washington, D.C. that is resolutely neocon. And they're like, no, this is contrary to the story that we're telling. So
what you're telling me and what we're coming to realize in this conversation, you and I, is that the State Department, who I know reached out to me when I was working at RT to kind of threaten or warn me not to work at RT, which is my choice and was taken away from me, also then followed up by calling a American newspaper to tell them not to cover me or tell my story based on what they needed as well.
Of course.
This is crazy.
It is crazy. You probably haven't forgotten the image of empty grocery shelves during COVID. Lockdowns and out-of-control mandates made that nightmare hard enough, and not being able to get the food you want for your family was just too much. So the people who run this country should do everything possible to make sure that never happens again. One small business called Merriweather Farms is doing everything it can to help. The founder of Merriweather Farms was so alarmed by this country's dependence on foreign meat that she left Washington, abandoned her career there, and came to the great American West to begin a company that created American grazed beef. And she has, and we eat it every day. If you sign up for a subscription today, you will get Merriweather's best offerings, 10% off plus free shipping every month. Your first box will be filled with 20 of their premium beef sticks, plus another special offer for more. 100% of Merriweather cattle are born and raised in the U.S., brought up right in Wyoming, Colorado, and Nebraska. They're all American all the time. Go to merriweatherfarms.com/Tucker, shop all products and save. And by the way, the meat is excellent.
This is crazy.
And by the way, I don't know anything about
the
mechanics of what actually happened, but I can say that there is a conspiracy of temperament and worldview that is not explicit, and I doubt it's even like a true conspiracy, and that I don't know if there's communication between the parties. But the people who work at the State Department, the people who work at the Washington Post, the people who work at every big news organization in D.C. and New York have the same worldview. And so they know that, telling your story, explaining how your First Amendment rights as an American were violated by the U.S. government is contrary to their interests as cheerleaders of the war against Russia. It'll help Putin. So we can't say it.
Right.
It's like, that seems like deep corruption.
And all we want to do is engage. I am not here, being a cheerleader for Russia or any other country.
We are allowed to be. We're not at war with Russia, by the way. So we are, in fact, waging a war against Russia and have been for hundreds of billions of dollars later.
Through a proxy.
More than 1 million people dead later. We're losing, and it's all very sad. But the truth is we're not actually at war with Russia. Congress has not declared war on Russia. So you've got every right to go to Russia, to take Russia's side if you want. I don't think you are. You haven't been to Russia and you're not taking Russia's side. But just to be clear, you have a right to do that. And it's an inalienable right.
As a journalist, it's my responsibility to represent their point of view.
Of course.
To put a microphone in front of them and say, what is your opinion of this situation?
Right.
And then report back. But we're not allowed to do that. I'm being told you're not allowed to get that side of the story. And if you report that side of the story, we're going to put you in jail.
So I do think that most journalists obey because they fear social sanction. They fear someone saying, you're a Putin puppet or whatever.
Oh, I hate that.
But in your case, you actually saw an administration try to apply the force of law. Like, we'll put you in jail. So that's what I think is different about your story. It's not just like people are embarrassed to be seen as pro-Russia. They were like, no, you violate the order and you're going to prison. That's a different level, no?
And I'm challenging it. As an American, first of all, just from a constitutional standpoint, I think I have a right to challenge it. And I've talked to enough people in the legal community who are helping me with this, who are saying, if you want to continue doing that, you have a right to petition to continue doing that in the United States. And now that the Trump administration is there, we're getting some friendly responses from people in the Trump administration who are saying, why is Rick Sanchez not allowed to work?
I know.
No. And I can't say definitively yet that the Trump administration will undo this because, things are moving and there's negotiations now with Russia. And I understand the Trump administration is trying to remove some of the silly sanctions that we have on them that are just ridiculous.
But the reason it's so hard to do any of that is because of the leash that remains in place, which is the fear people have, good people, patriotic Americans have, of being tied to Russia. So total has been the propaganda victory. You're connected to Putin. Putin's bad. You poll 100 Americans. 99 will tell you Putin is evil, which you may be. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
More evil than like a lot of our allies. Probably not. Right. But whatever. I'm not defending.
He happens to be the president of a country, and they have something to say, and we should report it.
Yeah, but it's gotten to the point where that kind of lynch mob mentality is so entrenched in the United States that even to suggest that someone is close to this boogeyman is enough to shut it down.
But
that's a leash. What they're doing is controlling your behavior.
You're absolutely right. But even on a more pragmatic standpoint, I looked this up the other day. I said, how much money did we spend to rebuild Europe after World War II? $140 billion in today's money.
Yeah.
We've spent over $200 billion in Ukraine.
To destroy Ukraine.
Right.
Well, that's the difference, right?
Think about that. If you ask the average American, back then, we spent $140 billion to rebuild Europe after the Nazis destroyed it. Was that okay? I think 99% of us would say, yeah, we needed to do that, and I'm glad we did it. If you went around America and you said $200 billion of your tax money has been spent in Ukraine, and then you said, can you find it on a map? What would you get?
And what could you do to Gary, Indiana, and Baltimore, and Detroit, and Minneapolis, like with that money? In general, I think the destructive impulse is satanic, and I think it really is a dualism. Either you're creating or you're destroying.
Yeah.
And if you look around and you're like, the outcome of all these different adventures is just purely destruction, I think you can say you're serving evil. I think it's honestly that God creates, Satan destroys. I'm sorry to get all heavy on you, but I think it's just very basic.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't it? Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.